Hi everybody, I'm Marty Knapp. I'm an artist and a photographer, but it wasn't always that way for me. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it all got started and what were the things that drew me in and kept me away and turned me into the person I am today. I live in Point Reyes Station, where my wife and I and our two dogs rent a place near the wildlands of Point Reyes. Down the street from where I live is a little gallery where I show my work. I also show my work on the World Wide Web, which has been a blessing during these last 12 months. So what I remember about my childhood is that I was fascinated with light. I would squint my eyes when I looked up at the Christmas tree lights. I'd lay on the ground Christmas Eve and look up, and when I squinted my eyes, the light would get diffracted and little tracers would come out of it. Other times I'd look at the sparklers on 4th of July or the fireflies in my backyard. If I got bored at school, I'd rub my eyes and they would make beautiful golden patterns. And that way I kept from being bored. I didn't know it at the time, but these were seeds of my becoming a photographer. When I was about 10 or 11, my grandfather, who lived upstairs, came down and had a beautiful object in his hand. He said to my mother, "Elaine, do you think Marty would like to have a camera?" My mother, a little bit shy, acceded to him, and the camera was put into my hands. I cannot describe the feelings that came thereafter. Now I have to tell you that as a boy, I was being groomed to be a scientist. So this matter of technical was really lighting into me. I took that camera and photographed my relatives, and I went to the Bronx Zoo and took pictures of the animals. Somehow that camera went missing. I don't know what happened to that camera. It's a lost part of history, but that was the beginning of my photography. There was a bit of a hiatus in my photography career from the time I was 10 or 11 till my early 20s. A friend visited me and he said, "Marty, we're going to get you a camera." Came back with a beautiful $250 camera, and the feelings came back to me as soon as I touched it. I knew it was something that I was going to do. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, I didn't know what, but I was going to do this thing called photography. In 1973, I moved to Point Reyes, California. And although I didn't know it at the time, the beauty was beckoning me, the beauty of the landscape there. However, I was a little bit not prepared to show any artwork, any landscape photography, although I looked at it. Instead, I started a children's portrait business. I got a resale number, started my business, and started bringing in a meager amount of money per month. However, that was my introduction to life as an artist and a business person. Well, one thing I know about myself is I'm a complex person. I'm a tactile person, I'm a thinking person, and I'm an emotional person. The part I'd like to talk a little bit about is the tactile part of photography. Even though we live in digital times, there is an object that can be made, a piece of art that can go into a mat and a frame. And I love doing that. I love making photographs. It's every bit as thrilling to me as the taking of the photograph, the image on a digital sensor. From 1983 to 1986, I spent laboriously working in my darkroom, doing experiments, figuring out how to get the film under control, to develop it, how to make a good print. I studied Ansel Adams' books. Then one day from walking to work in Inverness Park, I walked past White House Pool, and there was an array of beautiful, beautiful clouds, popcorn clouds, above the waters. I'd never seen them in Point Reyes before, and I'd lived there for over 10 years. However, at the time, it buoyed my spirits and made me think that maybe I could do this. Maybe I could photograph the land and make things that are worthy that people would want to have in their homes. The West Marin Music Festival came to me and wanted to use it for the poster of that year's concert. So they printed up a bunch of them, and I got on the map a little bit. Then the Bolinas Museum wanted to use it as a fundraiser, and I made the first 10 numbered editions of clouds. I still had a lot to learn about how do I find photographs. When I started out, I used my willpower and my brain to figure out which places would be mining grounds for photographs. So I would say, oh, okay, I'm going to go to Drake's Beach. Everyone loves Drake's Beach. I would figure out, and I'd return. What I was learning at that time was it's about the light, not about the place. I was convinced if I could get a picture of that, a picture of the Eiffel Tower, a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, a picture of Drake's Beach, that then I would have something that would be created by me, but also would have a commercial viability so it could support me. Along the way, I found out there was another factor involved, which is the lucky accident or serendipity, where you could find a photograph when you weren't looking for it, and you'd be able to let go of your goal. For example, I could be driving down the road, convinced I was going to take a picture of this rock or that rock and a certain light, and I would go by the best picture in the day, and I wouldn't allow myself to do it. I'd learned later to change plans in midstream, and that's where chance and serendipity and seeing light comes in. There's a few examples, I think you'll see them on the screen, where light shows up, and I was on my way to doing something else, and I stopped. Sometimes I drove all the way home to get my camera and come back, and sometimes the light waited for me. It was learning to react emotionally, not just with my brain, to make a photograph. When I began making landscapes at Point Reyes, I ate, walked, and dreamt photography. I didn't carry my camera everywhere, but I always took my camera eyes. I still do today. If a scene called out, I stopped everything, got my camera, and made the shot. In those heady early days, nothing mattered but getting the photograph. Mundane chores like groceries were usually neglected until absolutely necessary. One afternoon, with stomach rumbling, I stood staring sadly into my empty refrigerator. It was time to shop. I headed for town without my camera. At the Green Bridge, I noticed a brilliant display of sun rays streaming through a large void in the summer fog and cascading over Inverness Ridge. I need to get my camera, I thought. I laughed to myself as I came to my senses. I'd never get it in time to return and record this remarkable moment. I sighed and drove on to the market. Once inside the store, unburdened by any undue expectations, in 20 minutes all thoughts of fog and sun rays were completely forgotten. With a bag in each arm, I left the market and walked south on Main Street. I looked to the west, a breathtaking sight. Instead of dissipating, the display of sun rays had become even more fantastic. I threw the groceries on the front seat, started the car, and hurried home. I remember feeling amused and stupid at the same time. In minutes, I was parked in front of my cabin. I sprinted inside, grabbed my gear, and was back on the road. I felt there was no way, no chance, I could return with my camera in time, but I had to try. With the seconds ticking away, I pulled the car to the shoulder, just past the Green Bridge. I was shaking as I set up the tripod and looked through the viewfinder. It was nearly beyond belief. The light was better than ever. I made 5 exposures, and then the radiant array ended only minutes after I had arrived. I had almost given up on this light twice. Why it waited for me, I'll never know. I bet you if I had to photograph all my macro work on film, we wouldn't be much to get because there'd be so many failed experiments in developing the film. The lighting isn't right, the focus is off. With digital, what a great joy, what a great joy, being able to see immediately, have you got the photograph. Infrared photography in black and white is like black and white on steroids. By that I mean it magnifies the light in almost a supernatural way, and it's very seductive, especially in the plant world, when you have trees and foliage, because it turns out that at a higher level of infrared, which is a cutoff from the visible light. The electromagnetic spectrum goes from ultraviolet through the visible light to the infrared. It's all part of the light spectrum. Some insects see in infrared, but we humans don't. However, it can be recorded on film and on converted digital sensors. If you look at my photographs, you'll see that a lot of them have light emanating from the darkness. And that's something that I've always done. I photograph into the light. Well, infrared lets you photograph. You don't have to have it backlit. In fact, backlit might be too much. You can photograph in the middle of the day. But the main thing is the beauty. Sunlit greeneries turn nearly white, and blue skies and blue water turns very dark, creating a greater contrast. Well, in 2011, I taught a couple of photographers near the old barn in Point Reyes. It was sort of a rainy, misty day, and we decided to go inside the barn. I'd never been in there before. Inside, there was a cathedral-like light coming through the cracks of the barn. Now, I didn't have my camera because when I teach photographers, I generally do not photograph so I can be totally present to them. But I have to admit, I came back by myself later. And as I photographed the light inside the old Giacomini dairy barn in the wetlands, I thought of Leonard Cohen's song, Anthem.
There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
That took me another month of exploring barns and looking for light coming through. And once again, it's an example of a thread that runs through my photography of light emerging from darkness. One morning I took my normal walk in the wetlands trail, which is right near our home in Point Reyes Station. The light wasn't particularly good for photographing what I had in mind. Here's an example of taking what's given. I looked down at the glow of the sun rising through a plant. Fortunately, I had a macro lens, and I zoomed in close. I got down on my knees, almost as if I was praying to the plant. So people walking by must have wondered what I was doing. I'm practically on my belly. I've got the lens focused on dewdrops that are frozen on the plant. But because it's backlit, it looks like starbursts again. Later on, I came back and photographed dewy spider webs that looked like a string of pearls, and again with starbursts. I couldn't help but think how much they remind me of the galactic lights of the stars above in the Milky Way that I see on clear nights. I've been photographing in black and white for my whole career, my whole photography career, and I often get asked, why monochrome? Well, monochrome does something that the color doesn't. Monochrome emphasizes form, the direction of light, it puts edges on things, and it makes it easier to understand your compositional elements. I'm often asked to address schools and young people about what is it like to be a photographer? How do you do it? Do you recommend it? And so forth. These days, everyone has a camera in their phone, but not everyone is a photographer. So what I would say is if it's burning inside of you and you think you can do it, follow that spirit. Don't be dissuaded and become a lawyer or a doctor because your uncle was. However, be realistic. Be realistic. Think about it. And if you can't support yourself or your family with your photography, try to get a job that's close to photography. Maybe you can exercise your skills. And when you're young, you can indulge in your weekends or your spare time to create your craft. When you're ready, you'll know it. I've spent my life photographing. I've made it a career, a lifetime in photography. I'm not through yet. However, I do want to acknowledge, and I have to say this honestly, it has given me great pleasure to be recognized, to have my work appear internationally and nationally, and to be in many homes and many collections. And I'm grateful and thankful for all those who supported me, that enjoy my work, that it brings tears, happiness, joy to, and puts food on my table. I couldn't be more thankful. I'd like to encourage people that have seen my video today to come and visit me at my gallery if you're ever in Point Reyes Station. If you can't come out and you can't visit or it's closed, pop on to martyknapp.com. Sign up for my email newsletter. I write almost every week about the creative process. I introduce all new pictures on the site. There's over 300 there now. Go and enjoy them. And you can also purchase them, everything from a miniature to large ones. I have several books out. One is called Walking the Green Bridge Trail. One Place Deeply is the title. Walking the Green Bridge Trail is the subtitle. And Skywalks, which deals with my star photography of the Milky Way. Check them out. Thanks for looking at my video today.